Hello. Okay, it's time for another meta report. So I usually drop these on Monday, but with some other stuff going on, couldn't get it done. But we're here today to talk about it. So Brothers War has been out for like a week and a half, almost 2 weeks, I guess. And we're definitely seeing a shakeup in the meta. We're seeing some new decks. We're seeing some old decks get rejuvenated. We're seeing some decks that are basically using a lot of the old cards. That showed up out of nowhere. So I only pulled 3 decks to go over for this video, but there are lots of stuff to look at. So we'll definitely have to check them out next week too. So first deck is Azorius Soldiers. So this is a new deck that has only come out since Brothers War. This, I don't remember the last time there was a blue-white aggro deck. Oh, spoiler, this is an aggressive or aggro deck. And it's loaded with soldiers. Yeah, so this is definitely new. Let's take a look at some of the cards. Dennick. So Dennick has been around. A lot of people play him in Esper decks in the blue, white, black decks. He's a legendary creature. He is a human soldier, so it works here. He has lifelink. He's a 2/3, and he has a disturb where he can come back as a 3/2 flyer. And he has a different name, so you can have both of these out. And he is also a soldier. But on top of all of that, cards in graveyards can be the target of spells and abilities, and that is really valuable in the meta where there's lots of graveyard interactions. So you get the lifelink, you get the double cast out of him, and that extra cards can be targets of spells of abilities. Really gets some decks. So he just has great value, and he fits because he's a soldier. So, kind of in the same realm, another like control-y-ish card or utility card is Thalia. So, Thalia is another great card a lot of people run in white decks. She is also a soldier, of course. So, she's a legendary as well. So, she has first strike, and non-creature spells cost 1 more to cast. And then the first strike is really nice. But what makes this so good is the non-creature spells costing 1 more to cast works really well in an aggressive deck because you're slowing down their ability to control, remove, drop planeswalkers, drop enchantments, board wipes. Everything costs more. So the things that would shut you down are kind of delayed by a turn. And so because of that, you just benefit since you're trying to go fast and hard. Slowing them down works to your advantage, right? So great card. Second here, I have Siege Veteran. So there are 2 cards that I kind of fit into the slot of like buffing other soldiers. We'll look at both of them here. So the first one, at the beginning of combat on your turn, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. Whenever another non-token soldier dies that you control, create another 1/1 colorless soldier artifact token. So he puts a counter on somebody every single turn and target creature you control. It's not even specific to soldiers. And if anybody dies, because this whole deck is soldiers, you get another 1/1 soldier out. So the reason why I value this guy a little bit over the next card we're going to talk about is because this can go infinitely up. The 1/1 counters coming out every single turn, and you can have 2 or 3 of these down because he's not legendary. So if you're putting 3 counters out on like flyers and even on Thalia, who has first strike, it becomes a really annoying annoyance. And in this deck, the Siege Veteran isn't necessarily the highest priority card to remove. So sometimes he actually gets to stay out and put these counters out. He definitely does get removed often, but sometimes people want to get rid of Thalia or Dennick or some of the other cards we're going to talk about as a higher priority over the Siege Veteran. So sometimes you get this out for a while. All right, so another buff-like card that wears in here. I have a lot of cards like doubled up here because there's so many to talk about. Is the Valiant Veteran. So he's another soldier, of course, 2/2 for 2. Other soldiers you control get +1/+1. So he works really well with the Siege Veteran because those 1/1 colorless now are 2/2s. So, and it's other soldiers. Everything in here is soldiers. So that works really well. And then if he does die, you can exile him from your graveyard. As long as you don't have. Oh no, it doesn't matter with the Dennick because this is a trigger on the card and not a target with a spell or ability. But you can exile him and put 1/1 counters on all creatures, all the soldiers you control. So you can still get that 1/1 one more time kind of thing. So, very good. Okay, Brutal Cathar. This card's insane. It's so annoying. Anybody who's played against a bunch of these knows how annoying it is. So he is a soldier. He has a daybound and a nightbound form. In both forms, he is a soldier, so he would get buffs from things like the Valiant Veteran. He's 3 costs for 2/2. Whenever he enters or transforms back into his daybound form, he can exile target creature. Something to note is that this card works exceptionally well in this deck because it is extremely easy to switch between daybound and nightbound. There are cards in this deck that are soldiers that have flash, like the reinforcements. So you can not play a card on your turn, which will switch you into night. You can flash in your creatures on the opponent's turn, which keeps your value, so you're still using your mana efficiently. And then when it comes back to your turn, it's pretty easy to cast two creatures again to flip it back into day. Since everything costs like 2 or 3 in this deck, it's really easy to trigger that back and forth. As long as you have 2 cards to cast, right? So you can flip this and get multiple exiles on 1 card, or if the opponent is running control and not casting, they kind of give it to you for free because it's so easy to cast too. So anyways, it just works really well in this deck because it has flash and because it has so many low-cost creatures. It's very easy to switch between daybound and nightbound and get those exiles off. So fantastic card. Okay, this card. Oh man, this is a new Brothers War card, and this card is brutal. So she has a forecast. Sorry. She's the most expensive card in this deck. I think she's the only card that anybody is going to play in this deck. That is 4 mana. Everything else is 3 or less. Legendary creature, human soldier for 3. She's a 3/4. During your turn, your opponents can't cast spells or activate abilities of artifacts, creatures, or enchantments. So if you think about like things like Kiki Jiki, um, or any of the artifacts like the Bank Buster, things where you want to tap them for a draw or tap them to create a defender, you can't do any of that when this is out. So it kind of shuts down a lot of the utility that opponents could be running. And then whenever she attacks, you create X 1/1 colorless soldier artifact creature tokens, where X is the number of soldiers you control. So she kind of doubles your soldiers. And if you have something like the Valiant Veteran out, those become 2/2s. And so you could have 10 2/2s out or something. I don't know. It'd be crazy. I've definitely seen this get out of control quite quickly. And this synergizes extremely well with this guy, Harbin, Vanguard Aviator. So this is another Brothers War card, and this particular card, or these 2 cards you could say, but I think this particular card, the Vanguard here, is what makes this deck so potent. So he's a 2 cost 3/2 with flying already right there. That's high value, but there's more. Whenever you attack with 5 or more soldiers, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain flying. So remember, this can easily create 5+1 or 5/1/1s that could potentially be 2/2s. And if you attack with them all, they gain flying and then become 3/3s if you were to have all 3 of these out. It's not super common to get all these combos out, but you can definitely see how this deck works really well together. And getting 5 soldiers out is easy peasy because that reinforcement card we talked about, it flashes in and it creates 2/1/1s. So if you have 3 creatures down and there's your 5, and they all get +1/+1 in flying. So you have early creatures out that you're probably getting a little bit of damage on, and then you slam this down when you finally have 5 attackers and they're all flying, unless they have an answer right then and there, which they can't really cast it. If you have Muriel out, since they can't cast spells or activate abilities on your turn, it's a pretty deadly combo. You got that flying through, and you probably won the game off that. Yeah. So the strategy of this is overrun with soldiers. Of course, look at these. You can create so many soldiers, and they're so potent. The counters, well, the counters are definitely going to be board wipes or consistent removal. So getting rid of Harbin before you can attack, getting rid of Muriel before she can attack, getting rid of Brutal Cathar before it gets lots of value. Just being able to remove some of these key cards is going to shut this down, and it's not going to let it blow up out of control. Yeah, you still do probably have to worry about Siege Veteran 2. Probably need to remove that as well because you could just grow into something big. But if you have consistent removal and board wipes, you can definitely shut down the aggression on this deck. But very good, fun deck, and I'm really happy to see aggro coming back into the meta and working. I've been trying to get aggro decks to work for quite some time, and I've not been able to play them with any success in Diamond and Mythic ranks. So the fact that I was playing this in Diamond and got into Mythic with this exact deck is a really, really good sign for me. I love that aggro is back. Okay, that was Azorius. Okay, next I want to look at Radkos Midrange. So Radkos Midrange isn't really that new. We've seen lots of Grixis, we've seen lots of Esper, which are also running red black or red or white blue black. Like a lot of the cards we're going to see, we definitely have seen them in other decks, but we never saw Radkos Midrange really that much. And I'm not sure what it is exactly about it, but it seems to work really well. So let's take a look at it. Because I don't know why it hasn't shown up till now, but it definitely seems as strong as the other mid range decks out there. Okay, so it's a mid-range deck, and it's full of utility cards, or as somebody in my chat was mentioning, pure efficiency cards. Apparently, there's a version of this which is not too far off from the version we're going to look at today that is running Explorer format as well, just because of the efficiency that all of these cards have. It just everything is a good cast. Feels really good. Okay, so first one, we have to talk about the Fabled Mirrorbreaker, because if you're running red, you're running this card. Insanely good. Creates you a 2/2 red goblin that, whenever it attacks, creates you a treasure token. Treasure tokens can be used for mana. On the second saga, you can discard 2 cards and draw 2 cards, so it just gives you some cycle, which is really good utility if you have cards in your hand that aren't working for you, need something else. And then you can flip it into Reflection of Kiki Jiki. So this is what's so good. You can create a token that's a copy of another turret non-legendary creature. It gains haste, and you can sacrifice it at the end of your next end step. So we've definitely seen this with things like Corpse Appraisers, but in this particular deck, the only real contender, or the best contender, I would say, is the Blood Tithe Harvester. Whenever he comes in, he creates a blood token, and you can sacrifice him, and you get to give something -X, where X is twice the number of blood tokens. So if you're copying this card with Kiki every single turn, that blood token is coming in, and so like you're able to do -4 on the first turn, then -6 on the next time, -8, like so on and so forth, right? So if you have those 2 cards out on the field, you're easily removing something on the enemy's board every single turn. And if you don't have something to remove, you're just being able to attack with an extra 3 too. So that combo is really good. So the other card that is a good copy target for Kiki Jiki is the Phyrexian Fleshgorger, and this is a Brothers War card. So the majority of this deck isn't Brothers War. It is a lot of the cards we've seen time and time again, but this particular card is in here and is from the new set. So he's 2 black mana to cast him as a 3/3, or for 7 of any color, you can cast him as a 7/5. He has Menace and Lifelink, and his ward is equal to his life. So if you want to target him with removal, if he's a 3/3, you have to pay 3 life, or if he's a 7/7, you have to pay 7 life. And I've actually seen people playing this in decks where they're putting counters on him, and he's like 11 power. You have to pay 11 life to target him. Like, this is wild. Also, something really interesting about prototypes is if you can ever bounce them, they always come back in the full 7/5 version. So if you had this as a 3/3 and use like a malicious motent, which means he comes back in with 1/1 counter on him when he dies, he would actually come in the 7/5 plus the counter, right? So if you can bounce this in any way, like have it come off the battlefield and come back in, or pull it in from the graveyard onto the battlefield, it'll always come in as a 7/5. So this card is just really good. And then Menace Lifelink. Menace is very hard to deal with. 5 toughness is also decent enough toughness that is difficult to block. Even 3 is good early on. And then the lifelink. So constantly getting life on there, that's just a lot of value for you, because the more cards you get going in this deck, the kind of more potent you become. So getting that extra life gain and another target they have to worry about, or threat they have to worry about, this card's fantastic. And you can copy it with Kiki Jiki. So having 2 3/3s. The copy doesn't come in as a 7/5. Thank goodness. That'd be way too broken. So the copy is only ever what it is. So if you had a 3/3, you only get copies of 3/3. But having 2 3/3 lifelinks with Menace, that's annoying. Okay. Oh, that's a Blood Tithe Harvester. So next I have Shieldred, which I just had to put Shieldred here because we haven't talked about her in a while, and she's amazing. So we know this card well, but whenever you draw a card, you gain 2 life. Whenever an opponent draws a card, they lose 2 life. And then she is 4 cost for a 4/5 Death Touch. I will note, like, this is 2 black. These are 2 black. this is basically the only red card that in the Blood Tithe Harvester. So this deck is really heavy black. It kind of splashes in the red for the Kiki and the Harvester just because of the value you get from those cards. So something to note. Okay, and next we have Go for the Throat. So this is a new card from Brothers War, and it seems to kind of replace the Infernal Grasp, which is the same cost card, but it will not have the restriction of non-artifact. It'll destroy any creature, but you have to pay 2 life. So instead of having to worry about the paying 2 life, because there are situations you can be in where paying 2 life puts you in a bad position, you really don't know if you want to do that, but you need much needed removal. So switching that out for this is still good. The non-artifact, there are a handful of artifacts out there, so this does get you, like, you can't use this to get rid of the Phyrexian Fleshgorger, which is unfortunate. Occasionally people will actually run a Braid, which is a red card that is a 2 cost that says just do 3 damage to target creature or destroy target artifact. So if you throw in a Braid in here, you can still have that to cover your artifacts if there is something you need to get rid of. Like the flesh gorger, or even like a bank buster or something. There are a lot of artifacts out there. So definitely not a bad choice to run a Braid with this. I do also have Soul Transfer because this is the other removal that they run in here. With the addition of the Phyrexian Fleshgorger, this card has actually gone up in value in my opinion. So let's take a look at it. If you control an artifact and an enchantment as you cast this, you may choose both. So Kiki is an enchantment and Phyrexian Fleshgorger is an artifact. So if you can have both of these on the board, you get to do both actions. You can exile target creature or planeswalker and return target creature or planeswalker card from the graveyard to your hand. So that's just really good value. Okay, and next in the kind of control slot here at the end, or these two, I guess, I have Duress. So Duress works really well in this deck as well because if there are things that you can't get rid of, you can kind of, if you can't get rid of them with Soul Transfer or with the Go for the Throat, you can use Duress to kind of pull it out of their hand, so it's not an issue. Something like a Bank Buster, there's no actual way to remove a Bank Buster here, so Duress can kind of pull a Bank Buster out of their hand, or it just slows down their stuff. So Duress are always really good here. And then Invoke Despair. So this deck is definitely heavy black. As we can see, everything costs 2 black, or 4 black here. So Invoke Despair, we've definitely talked about this before. This is just high value card. Target opponent sacrifices a creature. If they can't, they lose 2 life, and you draw a card, and they repeat this for enchantment and planeswalker. So this is fantastic removal. It's also draw, and it does damage. So this just works overtime for you, this card. Okay, so what's the strategy of this deck? Well, it's removal and threats. There's a lot of really good removal in here, and these threats are annoying. Shieldred, Fleshgorger, Kiki Jiki with some Harvesters, or even with the Fleshgorger, like all of that is going to be very hard to deal with. So the counter, well, the counter is going to be removal and control. Getting rid of Kiki before she can copy anything, getting rid of Shieldred before they can get too much value out of the life gain or life done or damage done. And countering something like an Evoke Despair. If you do things like that to this deck, it really loses its potency and efficiency. And without some of these combos, it doesn't really have the damage. It's not going to pull other creatures out on you. It's just going to try to keep casting these same things. So anything to remove these items is going to definitely shut this deck down. Okay, so that was Radkos Midrange. Looks a lot like Grixis, except it doesn't have the make disappears basically and the corpse appraisers, but swapping out the corpse appraiser for a Phyrexian Fleshgorger definitely is not a bad trade. Okay, and then the last deck I want to look at, and this is maybe not the best deck out there. It's still really good, and it still is being played in high levels. I'm actually rocking this deck quite a bit right now. It is Esper Legends. So there is definitely an argument out there that the Esper Midrange or the Esper Control variants, which are all definitely alive and well, are potentially better and more efficient decks than this one. But what they don't have is they're not nearly as fun. I love this deck. I've never had so much fun playing with a deck like this. It's full of legendary cards that all interact with each other in such interesting ways, and I feel like I find really cool things to do with the deck every time I play it, and opponents like miss stuff so much. They like let me get combos in this deck that they really shouldn't have. Like they remove the wrong thing, like not realizing what I'm about to do. And that could just be like some inexperience if they haven't played against this deck a lot. But I find I get away with shenanigans way too much with this deck, and I'm having way too much fun. Okay, so this is definitely a mid-range. I kind of tossed around like what this is because it doesn't run a ton of control. It's pretty weak on the control front, but it's jam-packed with threats. And it does do really well when cards start working together, and that happens like once you have 3 or 4 cards kind of going. So I put it in the more mid-range section. Um, but it's just fun. Okay, let's take a look at it. Okay, so first card I want to look at is Jadar. So he is a legendary human wizard. He costs 2 for a 1/1. At the beginning of your end step, if you control no creatures with Decayed, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token with Decayed. So he just creates a 2/2 zombie token that you can attack with every single turn, and you'll just get another one at the end of your turn. Which you're like, okay, how does that win you games? Well, I'll tell you how it wins you games. It works extremely well with Rafine, the scheming seer. Sorry. So this deck is jam-packed with legendaries, and there is a legendary rule. We cannot have multiple creatures down with the same name if they're legendary. So not a lot of these cards are run in groups of 4. They are often like 2 or 3. Like I think there are 2 Jadars or 3 Jadars. And then lots of 2 of some of the cards in here. But Rafine you run 4 of because you always want at least a Rafine out. There's ways to get more than one Rafine out. We'll talk about that later. But he just works well with absolutely everybody. So let's talk about it. 3 cost 1/4. He's flying with ward 1. Excellent. When you attack, target attacking creature connives X, where X is the number of attacking creatures. So if you attack with these decayed zombies and something else, you get to connive for 2 and potentially put 2 counters or just cycle through 2 cards. So connive says that you can draw X cards and you must discard X cards. For every card you discard that is not a land, you put a 1/1 counter on that creature. So if Rafine and that 2/2 zombie are attacking, you get to draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards, and you potentially put up to 2 counters on Rafine. So he's now growing, and this 2/2 zombie, which you don't care about because it's gone either way after you attack, either gets damaged through or gets blocked, but you still get the counter in the draw. So it just works really well. Okay, next is Tolez. So Tolez works extremely well with Rafine as well. So she's a 3 cost and she's so easy to cast. Like look at white, blue, black, whatever. If you got some of these colors, you can cast her, which you pretty much always will. Okay, so she's a 3/1. When she enters the battlefield, she connives, so she only connives for 1. When you discard 1 or more cards, exile them from your graveyard, and when she dies, you get them all back. So, if you have her out while Rafine and the zombie are going ham, every card you discard, which is giving you counters on somebody, just gets exiled, and then if Tolez dies, you get them all back. The only way to really counter that from happening is to actually exile Tolez. If she is exiled, then everything that she has exiled goes or stays in exile. It's only if she dies, either through damage or, yeah, it was removed with the destroy card, then you get all those cards back. But it feels good because you don't feel bad about discarding non-lands because you're probably going to get them back. So this is also a legendary deck, and if you already have a Rafine out or already have a Jadar and you draw them, you don't feel so bad about discarding them for the connive. You get the points, and you'll potentially get them back with Tolez. So I really like that interaction as well. Okay. Before going to the next, I have so many cards. I had to kind of jam them in here, but Queza is also a really cool card that works really well with the connive mechanic. Whenever you draw a card, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So she's a 4-cast 3/4, which is pretty good. I only run 1 of these in my deck, and I did look at a couple other deck lists, and she wasn't in most of them. So this is not like a necessary card, but I just really do like the interaction where if you're attacking with a bunch of things and conniving, they're losing life for each card that you connive. So I just thought that interaction was really good. Okay. In this slot, I have to give it to Urtai Resurrected because he is basically your main removal and control card to kind of handle anything that is becoming a threat for you. So he's a 4-cost 3/2. He has Flash. When he enters the battlefield, you can counter target spell, activate ability, or triggered ability. So this does work on things like planeswalkers and artifacts, enchantments, all those kinds of things. And so that's option one. Or you could destroy target creature or planeswalker. In both situations, the opponent draws. So they do get a little bit of like compensation for getting flash removed or countered. But if you have something like Shieldred out, which is definitely running here, she's a legendary and she works well with all the drawing you're doing with the connives. So if you have Shieldred out there, those draws actually end up doing 2 damage. So it doesn't feel so bad all the time. Okay, and in the last spot, I have this crazy card. He definitely wasn't in every deck list, but I run him with great success. So I talked a little bit about Rafine having multiple Rafines out. This is how it's done. So Radadravik of Urborg is a zombie wizard. He's 3/3 for 4. He has vigilance and ward 2. Other zombies you control have vigilance. This doesn't really apply to any other creatures in your any other cards you have, but whenever another legendary creature you control dies, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's not legendary and it's a 2/2 black zombie in addition to its other color types. So it's a zombie, therefore it has vigilance. So I have had situations where I've had Radadravik out and people didn't read it or something, and they killed Rafine, which means I get another Rafine, except it's 2/2 and has vigilance. And then I had a Rafine in my hand I could play. So now I have 2 Rafines out. And all of these connive triggers trigger twice if you attack with both of them. So that was kind of insane. And then I could put it on the vigilance flyer, like buff them up with counters, and it's this huge vigilance flyer. I also have had this Radadravik work with Irtai, where somebody has killed the Urtai. Or I would attack with Urtai and they just mindlessly block. Like, why is she attacking with this random 3/2? When it dies, it comes back and I can again destroy a creature or planeswalker. So that's the kind of shenanigans I'm getting away with on this deck that I really shouldn't. Like, that spot removal needs to go on to Radadravik because nothing else dying will actually go away. It comes back stronger in some cases, most cases. So you definitely have to be careful. If Radadravic's out and you're seeing legendary creatures on the board, be careful what you remove. And then in this last spot, I had to throw in AO, the Dawn Sky, just because this is more commonly what people are running in that 4/5 slot for the mana on the mana curve. Um, not everybody is running the Radadravik. I imagine eventually people are going to start to realize like how it works and really hyper focus on removing it, and then it won't be such a good foreplay. But right now, I'm getting a lot of value. But in place of that, something that will get you lots of value if it gets removed is Ao the Dawn Sky. So this is another legendary creature. She's a dragon spirit, 5/4. She's flying and vigilance, so right there, that's good. 2 options. You can look at the top 7 cards of your library and put any number of non-land permanents with total value of mana value of 4. It's not very common you're going to pull 2 things out because basically Jadar and Thalia are your only 2 cast, and Denic, I guess, would be another 2 cast. So pulling both of those out because then that'll go 4. More likely you're going to want to grab like a Rafine or an Urtai or a Shieldred, something like that. Pulling one of those. So if you lose your 5/4 and then you actually pull a Shieldred or a Rafine or an Urtai out in place of that, it doesn't feel bad at all. It's like, okay, great, thanks. So definitely a really good card, and it is great when it's on the board because of the flying vigilance, and it's great when it leaves the card board because it brings you something. Or you can put 1/1 counters on each permanent you control, which isn't as common as an option in this deck, just because you don't have as many broad characters. There's a lot of duplicates of these, right? You're running a lot of the same legendaries multiple times, so it's not like you're gonna have like 10 creatures out and you're gonna put a 1/1 counter on them. You're more, it does say put 2 1/1 counters on, so maybe it would be good if you had like 5 or 6 cards out, but it's not as common to get that going. So yeah, great card. So actually, I'm gonna leave Radadravik on this image because I think he's awesome. Legendary synergies is a strategy. So we talked so much about it, but a lot of these cards work really well together. All of the draw mechanics from Connive, working with Shieldred, working with that queen we talked about, Queza. Oh, I kept calling her queen. There's another card that's queen that people run in this deck, but we don't need to talk about that one. Legendary synergies, yes. Okay, and the counters. Oops. The counters are Farewell. I'm putting Farewell. I don't know if you know this card, but it says exile all creatures, exile all enchantments, exile all graveyards, um, exile all planeswalkers. Like you can choose any number of those and basically exile everything. So the exile works really well because it won't die and Radkos won't be triggered. Tolez, everything you've exiled with Tolez goes away if she gets exiled. Uh, Things like that really shut this down. Also, removing some of this good stuff will definitely shut this deck down. But besides all of that, it's awesome. And Urtai can counter your Farewell. So if you hold on to an Urtai for that moment, you may be saved. So if you have these cards in your arena, I suggest playing with them because this has been the most fun I've had with a deck in a while. It is crazy cool, the stuff that happens with this deck. And there are lots of variations of this. I swap out cards all the time. I'll see a legendary in a game and I'm like, oh, I want that. I've seen people running Gix in here where every time you attack, you can then draw a card because that will work well. So lots of options for the legendaries in here. And the fact that you're running 3 colors is actually not a problem because there are lands like Plaza of the Heroes, which allows you to cast. It just creates any color you need for legendaries or any color of any legendary you have out, which everything in here is a legendary. So it basically it's like it's any color you want it to be. So running into mana problems is just not very common in this deck at all. So it works really well with all of that. Okay, that is all I have for the meta talk for this week. We will definitely have to look at some more cool decks coming next week. Thanks so much.